guys, Alec Peirce at the ranch with some more problems. I don't know why I have so darn many problems, but actually it's kind of fun. It seems to be my lot in life to solve problems. Fortunately, I'm good at it, and I enjoy it too. A lot of people don't enjoy solving problems. I do. You can see that I'm here in my second or third favorite spot, my garage, which is beautiful. Has everything. Nice floor, air, welding, lots of storage, warm, and I can get a lot done in here, boy, oh boy. But anyway, I'm here, and I have two ATVs. I'm sure you noticed that as well. And then one day, I took it for a little test drive, brought it back in, and I stopped it. And a second later, I noticed just a pool of oil underneath it. Well, no, that's, you see a pool of oil under a machine you've just been riding on. That's not good. You guys know that. There's this pool of oil that kept coming out. I tried to catch it quickly, and it stopped after a few seconds. It had probably a half a cup of oil it dumped on the floor. What the heck is that? So I took a look. I finally got underneath it on my back and looked underneath, and I found a strange hole in the crankcase down there. I have a picture of that hole. In this picture, you'll be able to see the hole. It's a little clear hole, no threads on it. And you can see it's right beside the crankcase oil drain plug. That nice shiny plug there. And Kevin's got the picture on there, and you're looking at it. And that's where the oil was coming from. Well, I didn't even know what that hole was. I'd not even seen it before. So at least I had found the oil leak, and after talking to a few guys on the ATV forum, a few forums, and looking around and so on, I finally figured out what it was. That little hole down there is actually the weep hole, is what it's called, for the water pump. Now, number one, this particular machine does not have a water pump. This particular machine does not have, it's not liquid cooled. It cools the oil. It's an oil-cooled machine, not water-cooled. So right out the bat, I'm, oh, what's going on here? So anyway, long story short, I get under there, sure enough, that's what it was. And it was a weep hole coming out through where the water pump fastens. Because, pretty smart actually, Polaris has made lots and lots and lots of these machines, millions of them, over a period of about 10 years. And interesting enough, they have used the same crankcase. They may have changed the body a little bit, they may have changed the head, they may have changed the displacement and a variety of things, but the machines look the same, and the engine, the crankcase, is the same for all of them. Now that becomes interesting because this machine, the 335, is oil-cooled. No water, no rad, no water pump. This machine sitting right here, which is virtually identical, a 99, and this is a 2001, it's identical. All the parts are the same. Body parts, rack, handlebars, wheels, it's all exactly the same. Same part numbers. Everything's exactly the same. This machine, the 400, is water cooled. It has a water pump and a radiator, just like an automobile. In order to keep the crankcases the same, all they did was block off the water pump spot on the 335. It's oil cooled. On the 400, they took that plate off, installed the water pump, put in a radiator, and it's water cooled. It's pretty smart, actually. Anyway, that was my problem. This one has no water pump, but there's still a place for the water pump, and there's still the weep hole for the water pump to keep the oil from inside the engine from coming out over the water pump drive shaft to have an oil seal in there. And I'm figuring, I'm not stupid, I'm thinking about this. That's where it must be leaking. And that's exactly where it's leaking. Come on, I'll show you. Okay, so here we are with my Polaris 335. Love this machine. It was only made for, I think, 3 years, but it's a great machine. Lightweight and more than powerful enough for what we do, and goes plenty quick. Takes 2 passengers. It's good. And as I just mentioned, this uses the same engine, same crankcase. You see, this is air cooled. You can see the fins on the engine up here. It's air cooled, but it does have an oil cooling system. So the oil that lubricates the engine, when the engine gets hot, that oil goes through an oil radiator at the front, comes back out, and the oil's cool, and that keeps the engine cool. It's a pretty slick system, actually. But in order to use the same crankcase on other engines, they have a water pump spot. They have a spot for the water pump with a water pump drive. It's right there underneath that plate. On this particular model, the 335, which is oil cooled, they don't need the water pump, so they just block it off with a plate. And so here's what I did. I just got in there and I took that cover off of there. Now I'm going to also show you this neat toy because this is great. I'm not a really big fan of battery operated tools because they never seem strong enough and the batteries wear out and a variety of reasons. But this has been really handy. I picked this up at good old Harbor Freight a few years ago, $99 I think it was, a cordless ratchet wrench. 3/8 drive, very strong, and you can use it as a wrench. It's quite long, you can use it as a wrench to wrench things, although its biggest value is right here. You see that screw, that bolt? It's out. That's where it's nice. So you're not spending 10 or 15 or 20 minutes swinging a ratchet wrench. So here's what happened. So I took out that bolt, I put it into my little magnetic dish. Boy, I learned that a long time ago. Have a magnetic dish handy to put your bolts and nuts and bolts in. I took the plate off and look what I found. Can you zoom in there, Dana? See what it is? Okay, so let me just point out what we have here. You can see here's the opening into which a water pump impeller would sit. There's the shaft that is driven by the engine. That is the shaft that drives the impeller. And there's the oil seal that fits on that shaft to keep the oil in the crankcase from coming into this water pump area. And this is exactly how I found it. First of all, you notice all the gunk around there, and that shouldn't be there. That should be clean in there because there's no oil gets in there, right? That's what the oil seal is for, to keep oil from going in there. There's the back of the plate, it's 32. And the oil seal certainly shouldn't be laying it down like that. That's exactly the way I found it. So I was right. The problem here, and the reason for the leaking oil, was this seal on that water pump shaft. Now, one more thing, if you can, Di, can you get squeezed back down in here? Can you look in there? Can you see that hole in there? I'm going to put my finger on it. Can you see right there underneath that shaft? Can you see that hole? That's the weep hole that I was talking about. So oil is not supposed to come through the shaft. This little seal fits way back in there over top of that bearing and keeps oil from coming down the shaft into this spot where the water pump impeller would fit on a water-cooled machine. And there's the weep hole, which is used on a water-cooled machine. But in this particular case, since the oil seal has fallen off, oil is coming out, oil is going down. Now, an interesting thing I should also mention, and you may be wondering this, when the machine stopped, only about a half a cup of oil came out, not more at all. It was enough. It was. I didn't want it to happen, but it wasn't very much. In a normal machine with a crankcase, if you have a hole that low in the crankcase, a whole bunch of oil will come out. And I think this engine holds, I'm going to guess at about 2 liters, two quarts, something like that. So you'd think a whole bunch of oil would come out. The crankcase is empty. No, this is the dry sump. This particular engine does not have oil in the crankcase, not much. Normally with this machine, the oil pump takes oil from the oil tank, which is over there, from the oil tank, pumps it around the engine to lubricate the engine all over. When the oil has lubricated everything, it falls down into the crankcase. But the same oil pump has a second impeller on it, which takes the oil that's fallen down out of the crankcase and puts it back into the oil tank. And in the meantime, it can be cooled and so on. But the point is that the oil for this machine is in a separate tank, not in the crankcase. There's only a very little bit of oil that's ever left in the crankcase, about a half a cup. And that's what was pouring out through that weep hole. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but maybe that is a little bit of interesting news for you. So what I have to do very simply is get a new oil seal, clean all this up perfectly, put the new oil seal back in there on that shaft, seal it off so that no more oil can get out that shaft into this chamber. And then I'll put the cover plate back on, put a little bit of RPV to seal it, and my problem is solved. Now I'm going to show you something else to follow up on this, to give you a little more information, and then we're done. It looks like exactly the same machine, doesn't it? It's not. This is the 400, the water-cooled model of the same Polaris Sportsman. This is a 2001 water-cooled. So it has a radiator and a thermostat and a water pump, just like a car. same as a car. But it's the same crankcase, exactly the same crankcase. You may recognize some of these things in here. Now, it is water cooled, so it may sound like I just broke it, but that's exactly how you do that. They're made that way. It is water cooled, so you may notice there's no fins. This engine is not air cooled. No reason to have fins on it. The outside is all smooth. Water goes around inside in order to cool it. So how do they manage to use the same crankcase? Well, as I showed you over there, that hole where that oil seal was broken, that hole, that space in there is used for the water pump. Let me show you. There's two hoses here, two black hoses. These are, in fact, radiator hoses, rad hoses. Rad hoses, we call them. Let me just get that off of there. Sorry. Get that out of the way. Like so. And there's a clamp on this one. I just pull that out of the way, like so. And now you can see that same spot on this engine. It looks different because it's got this funny thing with two pipes on it. Yeah, it's called a water pump cover. Now, if you take my trusty electric ratchet again, I've taken most of the bolts out. There's one left only. Put that on there like so, and hit the button. Guess what happens? That cover comes off. There it is. Cover comes off, and guess what's underneath? Yeah, an impeller. But that's exactly the same spot that the previous on the other machine. Exactly the same. There's another spring-loaded mechanical bearing in here, and a longer shaft, and a water pump impeller, and a cover with two rad hoses. Otherwise, it's the same. If you have the oil-cooled model, you don't have that shaft, and you don't have this cover. You have a flat plate sticks on that. Inside is the same oil seal. The same oil seal is on both machines to keep the crankcase oil from coming down the shaft into the water pump or into the water pump area. So it's a pretty slick idea. I thought I'd share that with you. I looked around. There's a lot of videos on various parts of these machines, but I was unable to find anything about the specific problem, the specific answer about the weep hole and the leak and so on. And I've solved the problem over there, and I'm going to put a new water pump thermostat in this machine because it needed it anyway, and hopefully have the two of them running very smoothly. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and check out that electric ratchet wrench. They're actually pretty good. You don't have to get at the Harbor Freight. They have high quality ones as well. I'm not sure if they're made in the same place or not. Make sure you get a second battery. Okay, that's it. Hope there's something in there for you, particularly you ATV owners. It's a lot of fun playing with these old machines. Talk to you soon. Alec, Peirce at the wrench.